I was raised in a barn. You know, oftentimes when you misbehave or when you are messy, people ask you sarcastically, they say, what? Were you raised in a barn? And if I'm honest, I take that a little bit personally. No, I was not actually in the structure where the goats and the cows and the horses were being raised, but I did grow up on a generational family farm where it felt a lot like being raised in a barn. Now, ironically, my mother was a neat freak, and there was no way that there was going to be dust anywhere in our house. But when I joined the military, there was this moment that after inspecting our room, the instructor took his finger, he ran it across, and he looked and he said, "Were you raised in a barn?" And I nearly started laughing. Can you imagine if I had responded to him in his ridiculous question by saying, "Well, actually, sir, it's funny that you should mention it." And then I continued on. Even as I'm sharing this with you today, telling you this story today, on the other side of my office here, I have some of my Marine paraphernalia, and it has dust on it. I'm sure that my drill instructor would not be pleased. You know, in the ebb and flow of life, we often find ourselves in the middle of various projects where the phrase, "pardon our dust," becomes a familiar refrain. Now, whether that's at home in a renovation there, or in an office project, an overhaul, or a community restoration effort, these efforts are all symbolized with the idea of "pardon our dust." We know that it's a temporary inconvenience, but it's working towards something greater off in the horizon. Consider for a moment the stark contrast of the idea of the orderliness in that military environment where precision and orderliness reigns supreme. That is what we always have to have in that setting. And in that setting, there's no room for any dust, any dirt. Every inspection is all about having those things cleaned, meticulously so. And yet, even within those rigid confines, there exists the potential for renewal as individuals and institutions actually adapt and transform over time. The military is always adapting and growing and changing. You know, the reality is when we look at Scripture, this is the story that we read about the Apostle Peter. He's this rugged fisherman whose life is marked by dust and by dirt in more ways than one. And probably the one story that is the most poignant to this is Peter's journey in his denial of Jesus himself. Jesus is predicting this to him in Luke chapter 22, and Jesus sees Peter deny him anyway. And despite of Peter's failure, Jesus restores him. He reaffirms him and loves and commissions him to feed his sheep, he says in John chapter 21. And so despite his rough exterior, despite his propensity to come running in and rushing in for things and make tons of mistakes, God saw fit to pardon him of his dust and utilize him as a cornerstone of the early church. Peter's transformation from an impulsive disciple to a steadfast leader, it serves as a testament to us of the redemptive power of grace and the potential for growth within each of us. You know, here, if we reflect on the last year here at the church, there's been a lot of transformation going on. Bethany's emergence as our new worship leader has been a breath of fresh air. This spirit of transformation has been happening there as well as Sunday gatherings are beginning to change as she leads us into the very presence of God. Under Bethany's guidance, our worship team has flourished. She's infusing our services with a sense of passion and a sense of purpose and bringing people along into the throne room. And at times the path is dusty. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of rough edges, but we press on knowing that our worship is a fragrant offering of incense unto the Lord. Similarly, Jeremy in the family ministry has brought about significant growth and expansion in our congregation. He's been dedicated to this, and the vision that he has is for the full family to be able to pursue discipleship after God. And so we've seen a number of new families join our congregation. We're nurturing new relationships, and we're fostering a sense of belonging within our church community. And Jeremy is committed to the next generation, the heritage of faith that we are longing for here as a church. It's a beacon of hope for the future. We look at what these kids are doing and how they're interacting. We're reminded that we are not the end-all, be-all, that there's another generation that desires to serve the Lord. And so we are laying the groundwork today for tomorrow's blessing. Beyond our worship and family ministries, we've seen the impact of transformation in various other areas of church life as well. Our finance team has been diligent in coming together this year to give oversight in various areas we as a church are wanting to manage our resources wisely in, positioning ourselves for continued growth and ministry expansion in the future. In a similar way, the facility team is doing the same with tireless efforts to deal with the maintenance issues that come in a building of our age and a facility that is beginning to need to be worked on a regular basis, improving our physical space, changing around our offices, doing additional work in our gymnasium to speak to a broader commitment to a biblical stewardship that is holistic in its approach to life. In the journey of faith, there are moments we must humbly ask for your understanding as we embark on new endeavors. Just like a renovation project has its setbacks and it has dust everywhere in the process, those are signs of change that are coming, and that's what we expect and hope for here as well, that transformation is underway. And so we ask you, practically speaking, for your patience and your support as we pursue many different exciting opportunities, all in order to glorify God and serve our community. First, we ask you to pardon our dust as we deepen our commitment to prayer and the ministry of prayer within our congregation. We are forming a new team this year to understand how the lifeblood of our church, the foundation of our faith, is always anchored back in prayer. And so we are doing that by putting a ministry deacon in place and a team that will form this year to foster more intentional prayer as a congregation. There are many times that we come before you as a church and ask you to pray collectively for certain items, but we want to be more intentional about that, where we have a full-fledged prayer ministry, praying for people in a counseling setting, praying for people in a biblical setting, that they would respond to what God is teaching and leading them in a worship service, and then also praying for God's guidance and provision as we journey forward as a church together in the faith. Secondly, we ask you to pardon our dust as we endeavor to better equip the saints. Ephesians chapter 4 asks us to do that. And so we are doing so by establishing a new deacon structure with all the work that we've been doing this year with our constitution and our bylaws. What we expected to do is raise up and empower care deacons and ministry deacons to serve as points of connections and support and ministry for the church family. Whether that's through providing a meal, offering a listening ear, being a source of encouragement, or our goal is all of these things come together to create a community where everyone feels valued, everyone feels loved and supported on their journey of faith as well. Finally and thirdly, we ask you to pardon our dust as we reach out to the nations with the love of Christ. As followers of Jesus, we are called to be his hands and his feet to a hurting world, both near and far. Locally, we are committed to continuing good neighbor projects and expanding the impact of our food pantry and other ways that we are doing our very best to meet the local needs of our community. In addition, we are actively partnering with missionaries all over the world, supporting their efforts to bring hope and healing and the message of salvation in areas of great need, telescoping beyond what we could ever possibly do on our own. In all of these endeavors, our desire is to honor God and advance his kingdom here on earth. And while the journey may be messy at times, with dust and debris all over making our path of progress look messy, we trust that God is at work, bringing beauty from the ashes and transforming lives for his glory. As the lyrics of one of those refreshed hymns that we've begun singing over the last few years remind us, it says this: "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts. Above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, tune my heart to sing your praise." You know, when we signed up to be a disciple of Jesus, whether we realized it or not, we were signing up for an ongoing remodeling project where Jesus would be our guide and our lives would be his to do with as he wills. And we are prone to wander, but we want to pursue him above all else. Several years ago, when the evangelist Billy Graham, his wife Ruth Bell Graham, died, this was in 2007, she chose to have engraved on her gravestone words that had nothing to do with her remarkable achievements. The way that the story is told is that she had been driving one day along the highway and went through a construction site. And there, after miles of detours and cautionary signs and machinery and equipment, there at the end, when she came to the last one, there was a final sign that said, "End of construction. Thank you for your patience." And that eventually is what Ruth Bell Graham chose to have written on her gravestone. End of construction. Thank you for your patience. Miss Graham, I believe, says it for all of us. If we follow our Lord, our very lives will be a remodeling project for Him until the day we die. We must be open to a holistic approach of daily transformation in our hearts and in our minds each and every day. And may we let the dust fly everywhere. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your prayers as we step out in faith and obedience. There is going to be dust on the shelves. There is going to be dirt everywhere. If we step out in faith and obedience to God's call, He will continue to work in our hearts and in our lives. This next year, may His grace sustain us. May His Spirit guide us and His love compel us as we continue in the process to be a heritage of faith for the next generation, as we seek to glorify God by making disciples of all nations. I'm excited to see what God has in store. Thank you.